So we're going to start, and I just want you to say who you are and give us some background to where you came from and your family came from. And let's just start at the very beginning.
My name is Lynn Burton now because I married Manuel Furtman, but my original name, our given family name, was Goldman. And we came from Philadelphia. And we're a family of 5 children. And we were a very, very closely knit family. And everything was, our mom came from Russia. And when she was in Russia, this is Zhytomyr near Kiev, her mother had a very successful farm, and our grandfather was a yeshiva brucher, and that was the perfect match in those days to have the, one being the intellectual and the other being the wealthy one. That was a good match. They had many, many children, and most of them passed away. My grandmother, one incident happened. There were pogroms in Russia, and they knew they were coming to the farm. And my grandmother, having so many children, she didn't keep track of who was there and who wasn't. And so my mother, being such a young child, maybe about 8 years old or so, she hid in the closet. And when she hid in the closet, she thought she'd be protected being so very young. She heard the Cossacks come in, and she heard them laughing and drinking the vodka and just being so rowdy. And then all of a sudden she smelled something burning. So she didn't understand this at all. She stayed in the closet, and sure enough, they burned the house down. Now, my grandmother, having so many children, didn't realize that our mom was missing. So she finally realized it, and she came into the house, grabbed my mom, took her over to the well. And she, and my mom, through that incident, had burns all over her body, and she lost her hearing. She had very little hearing, I would say. We ended up getting her a hearing aid, which was just a revelation to her eventually. And so as with all the Jews, it was like Fiddler on the Roof. They came as soon as they could. They wanted to go to the new country, to this country. Our grandfather came with our eldest aunt. They came here first, and then he started a little business, and he was able to afford to get the others to come over with him. So then our mom came, her brother Jack, and her sister Rose, and they came over. And then my grandmother had another child in America, Aunt Irene, and they made a living. They weren't wealthy or anything. They just made a living. And whenever somebody would come from the old country, they would bring him in as a boarder. The home was always open to anybody. My mom, when she was old enough, went to work in the factory, in the sweatshops. She had a girlfriend whom she met there. And one day the girlfriend said, let's go to this restaurant. They have nice music, they have a little show. It was inexpensive, so Mom went with her. And they went to this restaurant, and my father was a singing waiter. And that was the day when Idelsohn and Eddie Cantor were singing waiters. And so they went there, and for some reason my father was so attracted to my mom that he went over to her and he sang, "You Made Me Love You." So every anniversary thereafter, we'd have him sing to my mom, "You Made Me Love You." It was a real love affair. They had a wonderful marriage. And so that was our life. And my dad, he did all right. Of course, he knew he could not be a singing waiter, for long. So he started to sell uniforms, and that was for the Army, and made a nice little living. And then all of a sudden, the Depression came along, and that just took everything away. We lost everything completely. And so after that, we kept renting places, moving all over Philadelphia, just trying to get by because we were poor, not like the homeless today, but we were poor. And if my father came home, if he walked down the street, and if we knew that he wasn't whistling a song, because he was always either whistling or singing, we knew something was wrong, and that's when he lost his job. So he would go to work. He would do anything for the family. He was a wonderful man. So he would go in the ballparks, and he would actually sell sandwiches, do anything in the world to make a living for us. And that was our dad. And then, let me see, my sister and I. We were just very close, and we always sang together. We just did harmony. It was natural. And we would sit outside on our porch in this one house that we finally bought for our parents. And we would just sort of sing Somewhere Over the Rainbow and just figure we're going to be stars. You know, we'll get into the business, become stars immediately, and that'll be great. So, of course, that didn't happen at all. And let me see, am I backtracking? My sister was in high school, girls' high, and I was in Alney High School. And my sister had the idea that we should go into show business. So I said, okay, because we did harmony. We figured we'll raise the economic level of our parents. We'll at least make some money for them, which eventually did. That's right. Then we bought them the house after that. So we went into show business. But the first thing we did it was during the war. And we went to the Stage Door Canteen. And at that time, there were the Lane sisters, who were 4 sisters who were very famous in Hollywood. So my eldest sister, and Dorothy, Ray, my sister, Rachel, and myself went to the Stage Door Canteen. They thought that was really nice, having 4 sisters from the city. And we sang there. And there was a woman who was the wife of a very a society orchestra leader, Meyer Davis, I think it was. Meyer Davis. And she took a liking to us because we sang there, and we'd always, a few songs. And she liked us very much. So she said she would like to take us around to places like Fort Dix, all of these places where we could sing for the soldiers. And that's exactly what she did. So we sort of honed our talents in a way by doing that. So that was that period of time. And oh yes, it was wonderful. Our mom was such a wonderful human being. She didn't speak much English because of the hearing loss, but she had a way of communicating so well. And we decided we went to this naval hospital in Philadelphia. And Mom would go over to the fellows there, and they loved her. And she would talk to them and just be there to be with them. And then she started bringing cakes along, and if one person had a birthday, she would make a cake for that person. And there was a paraplegic there especially that we loved dearly, and he loved her too. But then there was a young blind fellow who we asked if he could come home with us for just the weekend. And that's exactly what he did. He came home, and that's where I know I learned that, let's say, the clock showed where everything was. It was like meat was at 12 o'clock, potatoes were at 12:30, the vegetables were here, and so that was sort of his language with us. And it was a wonderful, wonderful weekend. So that was a period of time where it was singing at the Stage Door Canteen, taking this young man home, going to the hospital every Sunday, bringing them things, cookies and stuff. And then my Mrs. Davis, who took a liking to us, is the one that started us got us into going to all the various camps, Fort Dix especially. And so that gave us time to hone our talents. After that, let me see.
Wait, can we go back for 1 second?
What?
So the way you're talking about it, most of the stuff you were singing at that point in time was more American, secular kind of music.
It was all secular. To me, I remember it that way. It was secular, and we did the songs of the day, the pop tunes of the day.
And you'd hear them in the radio?
You hear them in the radio, yes, and then we just, knew them in our heads, memorized them, and so that's how we learned. It was just sort of a natural thing for us, because as my sister said, it was a.
That's what how we did Yiddish stuff, how we incorporated Yiddish and English.
Well, no, but during that period of time, it wasn't Yiddish at all. It was strictly popular songs for the boys in the service. After that, we did USO. How did we get into USO?
49. We covered 50 cities
Well,
in the States.
I know that we did USO, and we covered, no, I think it was about 50 states with that. We went to all the hospitals, and that was a tremendous experience. In fact, one of the things I remember so well, we'd be in our gowns and we'd lie on the grass waiting for the second show. We did 2 shows a day. And we went to, they called it Ward 8, where they had all the kids who were just out of their minds from the war. And we went there and we sang for them. We had a juggler on the show, but they wouldn't allow anything that would be, that they would have problem with. So it was just the 2 of us. So we were out in the grass lying there, and the young man from Ward 8 came over to me with the fellow that accompanied him, just one of the people who took care of this ward. And he offered me some chocolates. And I was quite surprised. And he said, take it. He probably remembers you. He remembers a girlfriend or something. You remind him of that. So that was kind of another little sort of side memory. And then after USO, we decided, we did Yiddish, which was so natural to us. So we went to the Borscht Belt. And we started singing in the Borscht Belt. We'd travel from Philadelphia up to the mountains, and we would, do the various jobs there. We did 2, if we were lucky, we did 3 shows a night, but sometimes it really just 2 nights, 2 shows a night. And we played everything. We played all the large hotels, and we played the kachelanes. Now the kachelanes, even though it says, cooking alone, it was actually a community kitchen. And all the women would come together and they would have their own little space. I guess that's the kachelane, but they would cook in this one place. So we did that. So we ran the gamut of one to the other. Then there was an agent who would put us up. If we didn't stay at the hotel overnight, there was a boarding house, and that's where all the acts got together, and we would tell how great or whatever it was that we did in our shows. And there was competition there. I mean, we all sort of did our own thing. And that's when people like Stubby K, I remember, who became a good friend, who was in Guys and Dolls, did quite well on Broadway eventually. And then there was Henny Youngman, too, and Buddy Hackett for sure. A lot of the people who became quite famous later were part of that little boarding house thing. And so we would brag about our shows, and yet we'd eat there, and it was very inexpensive. So that was the mountains, and we did enough of that. And then there was a Seymour Rechside who was extremely important in our careers. He knew we did the mountains, and so we saw Seymour. I guess my sister was the one that got in touch with him, and he heard us, and he liked us very much. And so he really was the one that catapulted us into all of this Yiddish stuff. That's when the Barry sisters were discovered by Ed Sullivan, and he took them to Europe, or to Russia. And so we took their place at WMGM with this phenomenal band, Edelsohn and his band, and we'd have all the stars come in, and we'd have Maury Amsterdam, we had Joey Bishop, Steve Lawrence. I sang with him because Edie wasn't there. And so we just met everybody there. It was wonderful. And Henny Young became a close friend. He was a little crazy. He was wonderful. and so we did WMGM. And then also there was a little radio show, the little program, Miriam Crescent, who was Seymour Rechside's wife, who would do the, in Yiddish, she would tell all the news of the day. And so we did something there, and then Seymour got us onto this Banner Records, We never made any money with them, but we were on Banner Records, and we did a few songs there. And then I guess my sister was the one that heard about the Borshcapades. Now, the Borshcapades was a fantastic show. Joel Gray was in that. And Bathsheba, who was a phenomenal cantor, she was phenomenal. And we opened the show, and they had other acts along the way. So we were with them, and we traveled all around. It was quite wonderful. And Joel was great. He did Romania, Romania. That was his thing. Bathsheba was tremendous. She actually closed the show. Joel was right before that. And it was extremely successful. We traveled with them, and it was great. And so then after Borshcapades, we, let me see.
Can we go back for 1 second?
Yes.
So you did the Borscht Belt before people really knew who you were.
Yes.
Yes.
So what was it like? How were you treated? How were you treated as this unknown act amongst all these very well-known acts? And how did you feel about being there and the whole thing?
Oh, we felt wonderful. We felt very much at home. And insofar as being an act that wasn't known, it didn't matter, because when we got up there and performed, we were very confident. And so we just did our shows, and I don't think we did do Gross Singers. I did that later in life, but we did do all the other big hotels. And so we did that, and we did the Kachelains, and we'd go home to Philadelphia in the middle of the night. I mean, I don't know how we ever did that, but then it took like 2.5 hours to get back. There was no freeway or anything. And that was we commuted back and forth.
Was the Borscht Belt in itself such a popular thing that an unknown act could just be put in there and be, treated by the audience as if it was just part of the bigger grand?
Oh, it didn't matter. We were just all part of everybody, whether you were beginners or whatever, you were treated equally. You just had to perform. And I remember this happened after my sister left. I'll tell you about this one incident with the Hasidim at that hotel. So anyhow, but the Borscht Belt was terrific. We just loved it. We felt so good. And afterwards we'd have tea and cookies with them. And we mixed with the audience. So that was home to us. And then after that, the Borscht Belt, then we went into this show, the Borshcapades, which was a tremendous experience. And after and Mickey Katz was, of course, the orchestra leader. That was Joel's father. And so it was a tremendous experience. We felt very good. We felt very confident at that point about ourselves. And so after that, the Borshcapades.
So was Canada next?
Yeah.
Oh, Canada was now Canada was a very important thing. In Canada, we spoke, I had a high school French.
And this was right afterwards.
Afterwards, yeah. And so we went to Canada, and since we spoke a limited French, but we spoke French, we played Montreal at the Esquire, which was a wonderful club, Esquire Club. And then after that, we started working in Quebec, the Vieux Quebec, Old Quebec. And we went there, and there they spoke only French. So that was imperative. So that's where we got on to our little folk songs that we came to love, and we sang in French. Then we played a place called Trois Rivières, Three Rivers. And we went there, and they still had mud on the street. It was sort of the back country, and we sang there too. And that's where my sister, she always felt I could do anything, and I could do French and everything. So they asked for someone to be able to, announce the acts, to be the MC. So she said, my sister can do it, and I did, but it was really difficult. I went back to the orchestra, and I would talk to them and to just hone up on my French enough to say, bonjour, mesdames et messieurs, anyhow. It was really quite something. So we did Canada a lot. We kept going back and forth there, and it was really the most, we would be exhilarated. It was always snowing. It was awful, but we loved it there. And then at one point, let me see, my sister let's see, met her husband. He would try RCA Victor Records. My brother-in-law his father had Mainline Cleveland, which was RCA Victor Records and Whirlpool appliances and things like that. And so when we went on to RCA,
That's it.
wait a minute.
Bob Merrill, tell him about how we got an RCA contract.
Oh yes,
That's the
oh
big
yes, oh yes.
thing.
Okay, that's fine.
She's
Yeah,
always
you-
thinking of it. She's-
You had the Yiddish contract, and so
Yeah,
we
and-
know that you released some records on RCA. So why don't you tell us about how you got on RCA Records?
Okay. My sister would always look at the Variety magazine in these places, and she noticed that Bob Merrill, who wrote Funny Girl and Doggy in the Window, was looking for an act, and he was teaming up with Murray the K, who was a very big disc jockey in those days, and they were just looking for somebody. So we knew this wonderful songwriter, Bernie. It was Ben Weisman, but we called him Bernie Weisman, and he had us make a demonstration record. And since we did all of the folk songs up in Canada, he took one of the songs, Si mon man voulait danser, and he took that and put it on a demo record. Now, when my sister found out that they were looking for an act, she took the record to Bob Merrill, and he listened to it, and he was very impressed. And he said, "Look, I'm going to take this, and I'm going to give you an English translation," which was "Doing the French Can." And we did that, and we did, actually, it was about 6 songs we did on that, Divided Love, whatever. And RCA sent us around the country to all the DJs to push the records. So we went all around, then we went to Cleveland, Ohio, and that's where my sister met her husband. He was with RCA Victor Records. His father was Whirlpool and all. And so the two of them, they somehow hit it off right away. And he ended up following us around the country just to be with her. And he kept going and going. And finally, in desperation one time, he said, we were in the Catskills, and he came there, and he said, "Look, you either marry me or that's it." And so my sister, she didn't know what to do, and so she waited a while, and then we were up in Canada, and we were both working up in Canada in Quebec, and he called, and that's when he gave the ultimatum. And I said to her, "Marry him. I mean, he likes you so much, and you have a lot in common, and you're not getting younger, and so absolutely marry him." And so that's when she keeps saying that I didn't push her. I just accepted the fact and made her recognize that this was the guy for her, this was the man for her. So she did. She married him, and we had a Philadelphia wedding. It was beautiful. And
Can we go back for 1 second
Yeah.
before that? How far west did you get during your DJ tours?
well, actually, we did mostly the East Coast. We did we actually, for our DJ tour, it was mostly the eastern part of the country. So that's it. We didn't get out west.
And did you ever get out west as the Burton Sisters?
Well, that was with we got out west as the Burton Sisters with Borscht. And that was our thing. Then we came all the way to, we went so far as to Palm Springs, in fact, and we, and so that's what we did, and then we came back home again, of course.
We traveled with the Yiddish show with Michael Rosenberg.
Well, then we had an incident with, this Michael Rosenberg, who
Let's
was,
talk about the Yiddish show and then go into the incident. So tell
okay.
me about that.
the Yiddish, you mean the Borscht?
Is that the Yiddish show?
You said the Yiddish show. The Yiddish show was, we went traveling with this Yiddish show. We went to Montreal.
Is this the
we went to
Borscht?
No, that was
before the Borscht. That's when we met Hal Zeiger at the Borscht in LA. But we went with Michael Rosenberg and with the group Canada. Then we went to Mount Royal in Canada. And then we went to Chicago. And then went to LA. And then he came. He was producing, and he saw us. And then he invited us to do Borscht after that. After we finished our gig.
Well, Michael Rosenberg was a character.
Okay, so tell us.
Michael Rosenberg, we went on a show with him, and he was a gambler. So we went out, we drove across the country in this car in the heat of California, and he had gambled his money away, so he couldn't pay us. Now, we had a sister, our oldest sister was Dorothy, and she sort of managed us in various places. At that time, she came along with us. And so we were all in this car. It was so unbearably hot. And she was smart enough to say to him finally, you have to give them some money or else we can't go any further. And so he did pay us a little bit of money, but we never really recouped what our salary really was. So that was Michael Rosenberg. The good thing was the Borscht when we went with Hal Zeiger, who my sister met, and he was conducting the show, and so we opened the show, and it was a wonderful experience. We loved that. After Borscht we came back, and
Borscht Belt, and
then we're back up to the marriage, where your sister met her.
Oh, yes.
Husband.
Oh, yes, that's right. So she met him, and they got married, and they settled in Cleveland, Ohio. And in Cleveland, and they bought this wonderful place in Chagrin Falls and raised 4 fabulous children. We're very, very close. And so let me see.
So that leaves
What happened to you?
That left me alone.
So
So I had no act.
That's
And so what happened was when she married, I had no act at all.
How did you feel?
So I was happy for her, but it was almost like a divorce because we used to sleep together, we did everything together, and I was alone. But I was so happy for her because she was my sister before being a partner to me. And so what I did was, I had no act, I had no money, so I talked this lady who ran the Moore McCormick line, the cruise ships, and I talked her into taking me on because I said I did languages and she wanted an opera singer. But I talked her into it and it was perfectly fine. Thereafter, I went on cruises. I went to South America. I went to the Caribbean. They wanted to send me to Africa, but I thought, oh no, the agents are going to forget about me. I've got to get back to New York. But what happened was interesting on the South American tour. Lena Horne, who is a fabulous performer, well known, she was working in Rio de Janeiro. She came aboard the ship with her husband, Lenny Hayton, and of all things, I opened my show with a song called Digga Digga Doo Doo. That was her song that she did in her own little Broadway show. So here she is, sitting in the audience, and I'm singing Digga Digga Doo Doo, and I was nervous as can be, but I did it fine, and she was so sweet and comforting and lovely, and so was Lenny Hayton. And that was kind of a nice experience that I had on that cruise. So then after the cruise, I decided I had to come back home, back to New York rather, and to get some more work. So I went to a cattle call for Fiorello, which was a Pulitzer Prize winning play. And it was playing on Broadway, and they were looking for the first national company to go out. So I I tried out for the course. I got the part. Then after that, they gave me 2 understudy roles. One as Mrs. Pomerantz, who was the Jewish woman who would just get to his office and say, Mayor, you've got to get my son into medical school. I played her. And then I played Mitzi, who was the mistress to Jimmy Walker. And so there were 2, and I played them both. It was just wonderful during the course of the show because people got ill and I took their place. So that was terrific. After Fiorello, though, I had no work. So I went into gray advertising. And the strange thing about that was I worked for the account executive there. And who is our account but RCA Victor Records? So I went from being a rising star, being a secretary, which was fine. They treated me lovely. In fact, when I finally decided to marry my husband, they gave me a wonderful, we went down to the wine cellar of a lovely restaurant, And we had hors d'oeuvres. It was just wine and hors d'oeuvres. It was lovely. And then all of a sudden, I almost dropped my hors d'oeuvre because out of the archives, they took Doing the French Can-Can. And so they played that, and I was shocked.
Did you know that they knew who you were?
Yes, I did. I knew they knew who I was, and so it was kind of a strange thing in the beginning, being a secretary after having, been one of the rising stars there. But I took it with aplomb. I didn't think much about that. It was fine. This is my job, and that's what I did. And then also I supported myself with some extra money doing one-nighters wherever we go, and so between the two things, I did quite well. Then,
do you mind if I ask you? I mean, how did you feel about your career at that point in time? I mean, you had a sister act that because of just a marriage, it wasn't. Some people have acts that don't work out, and because it just wasn't successful or whatever. Yours was on the rise and was stopped.
Yeah.
And then you were forced to go out on your own, where you weren't really prepared for that really at the time. What was going through your mind, and how are you feeling?
When my sister left, I loved my sister very much, and I knew she was getting older and that she should get married. So I was delighted that she was going to get married. I really was. And so it didn't matter. We were on our way, in fact, to Las Vegas to play a lounge room there. And all that stopped when she got married. But that was okay with me because I was ready to carry on. I mean, that's what we do. We just go on to the next thing and the next thing. And so they were my honest feelings. And so then my sister calls me at Gray Advertising and says, you must come into Cleveland, Ohio, because I met somebody whom I think you'll like. I met him, and he said to me, do you have another sister at home or somebody? And she said, sure, I do. And so I came into town, and I met my husband, and it was just instant. We just were so attracted to each other. I met him for 2 hours, and then I went back to Gray Advertising. He went back to California, and I thought, gee, I really want to see him again. So I came out to California, told him I was coming out, and after 3 days together, we decided to get married. It was some sort of a tremendous attraction. I didn't know much about him. I knew a few things from his family, who was connected with my sister's family, so I knew something about him, but not nearly what I should have known. Anyhow, we got married 2 weeks later at my sister's house in Cleveland, in fact, and it was great. And he was married to, he was a physician, first of all, and he was in internal medicine and hematology, and he was married to a woman who was an epidemiologist. And they were doing cancer research together. And unfortunately, she passed away at age 47 and left 3 children. And so when I met my husband, it didn't matter. I mean, I just loved my husband, and I met the children, and I adopted them. And we lived in San Francisco, and it was a wonderful life.
What was your wedding like?
Now, my wedding was wonderful. At my sister's house, my brother-in-law at the time took me down the stairs. It was a beautiful home, and we were there, and the children were under the chuppah. So we had the 3 kids there. So it was like a marriage, all of us marrying each other. And that's how it worked out, because my kids are very, very close. We're a very close family. And so the interesting thing was that when we came out to California, when I came out here and we settled down, the children, the girls were 10 and 13, and our son was 18. He was at Davis already, at the university there. And so we got together, and somehow it just all worked out. I realized at first there was a bit of opposition, perhaps here and there. Sandy accepted me completely. Denise thought I was taking her father away, and my son wasn't interested in me. But we ended up being so close, and now we're just the tightest of families. Now, the hard thing about the marriage was, I came to San Francisco, and being of Orthodox background, my husband was a cultural Jew, and he was Jewish, but they never had all of the rituals. They never had all of those things. So I had to kind of come into the household with some of my rituals, but I wanted the family to be close. That was the most important thing to myself. So we would certainly keep Yom Kippur. The girls tried, but my husband and I would keep Yom Kippur. He loved when my Shabbos Licht, I would light the candles on Friday night. And he got to love all the things. We had Passover. But it was a very different thing than my sister, who remained, her whole family was so involved in Israel and Judaism. But mine was different. And so, but it was wonderful. We ended up, my kids all know they're Jewish. And we have a great relationship. It's just a very different atmosphere. And of course, I'm used to it now. I go to a Reform synagogue, which is phenomenal because it's open to atheists or people, anything. It's a very wonderful, we have a wonderful rabbi, woman rabbi. So Judaism is so much a part of my core being. And I just sort of blended into this California, San Francisco, not very Jewish in a way,
What part of San
area.
Francisco did you?
And we lived in St. Francis Wood, and so it was a lovely neighborhood. We had a lovely home there, and the neighbors, except for one, I guess, was not Jewish. But it was okay because there was enough Judaism in our little family, and it was fine. It was hard for me to go to Temple Emmanuel and hear them play an organ because our mom thought, "Oh my God, that's so goyish." But I got used to that too, and so that was okay. But now I'm in a wonderful synagogue, which is just so open and so, it's also traditional. They do all of the wonderful things that I'm used to. It's just, and that's perfectly fine with me. I'm happy with that.
Can I ask you a question about that? Because this is something that's very interesting to me. You come from an Orthodox background, and you're put into a situation where you have to redefine your Judaism, pretty much, in order to keep the family happy and keep your other goals going, right? What's the inner conversation you had with yourself during this process that made it so you could do something like that? How did you, and by the way, I'm an agnostic. I'm not coming from a place of, oh, I'm an Orthodox, I can't believe you did this. I'm actually more interested in what was your inner dialogue during this period of time, because this is the American experience you're talking about here.
Yeah. Well, insofar as that, there was never a conflict for me coming from an Orthodox background going into the other, because I knew that my core self, I was so much a Jew, so strong in me, that it didn't really matter. So I didn't have any kind of push-pull or anything. The hard thing was, as I say, going to Temple Emmanuel and hearing the organ. That was difficult. Just getting used to sort of it was almost Gentile to me. But other than that, there was never any inner conflict for me, because I know who I am, and I always knew who I am. So, it didn't matter. I just roll with the punches and go along, and no matter what people around me are saying or thinking, then it's okay with me because I know who I am. And so, anyhow, we had a wonderful life, and he passed away at 90, and we had 40 years together, which were terrific years. And he passed away 3.5 years ago, and I went on to another life, a very, very different life. Out here in the peninsula, where he retired, we did a lot of city things and concerts and chamber music. I might speak about my husband a bit. My husband was wonderful. He was not only a physician, but he was a poet. I have beautiful poetry that he wrote. And he had real estate. He had big apartments in San Francisco. He always bought large buildings and had people manage that. So he was so multifaceted and he did everything so well. And then the violin was such an important part of his life. He played the violin, and he went to, one of the fellows in the San Francisco Symphony had a Guadagnini. And the fellow was strapped for money and had to buy a house, and my husband bought the violin from him. This was a famous violin, and he adored that. And he would play, we'd come home, and he would be playing morning and afternoon. He just loved music so. And he got me very involved, in fact, in classical music. So finally, when he was really getting quite ill, our daughter Sandy said to him, "Dad, you love that Guadagnini. You've always wanted to go to the Israeli Symphony. Why don't you do that now?" And it was wonderful because that's exactly what he did. They came for the violin, and they insured it before it left. It was quite expensive. And Zubin Mehta's foundation, they were thrilled to get this violin. And my husband had one stipulation, or two. He said, one, I don't want any notoriety, but I want someone to play it, one person, and I want them to play it every single day. That's how much he loved the violin. So, and that's exactly what happened. And unfortunately, Zubin Mehta invited us back stage when the Israeli Symphony was here in Davies Hall. He was too ill to go, but I went with my daughter Sandy. And of course, he was extremely gracious, a lovely man, and was thrilled about the violin. At least my husband had the satisfaction of knowing it was where he wanted it to be. So that was kind of a lovely ending to that particular story. But we had a life too, which was so wonderful because we would have chamber music all the time, and I'd make some little things to eat, and then he'd have these trios or quartet come over, and they'd play music all night long, and it was just wonderful. And then there was a time when, being an amateur but quite good at the violin, we would go up for workshops to Chico, at the university up there, and he would do workshops there with different groups and things, and he was fantastic. He was a wonderful violinist. In fact, he was offered the first chair in 2 orchestras in the peninsula. He refused them, of course, and he was older at that point, but that's how good he was. He was wonderful in everything that he did. And that was my husband. And then when he passed away, though, I decided to I joined a walking group, and we have about 21 core members, and we walk every Thursday, and we go 3 to 5 miles in the parks, and I walked the dish here in the peninsula. And so I've been keeping up physically quite well, and I love the group, and we have potlucks, and we have wonderful times together. So my life has taken on a very different way. We're very close. We're either widows or widowers, a couple of married people, but we have a great life together. Then also, I have a French group, the Salon Français, and we meet twice a month, and we speak only French. And the women are all from Europe or Vietnam. So it's been, I've been with them for years, and so we have a wonderful time there too. So that's another piece of my life now. And we had a Havurah, and we had that for a long time. And all the Jewish holidays were spent together. And then it's sort of breaking up now, but that was another source for me of social life and good friends. So I really feel I've had a most wonderful life up until now, and look forward to the future.
Artwork. Oh, the artist. You're an artist. The sculpting.
Well, I do some sculpture. I did sculpture. When I was single in New York, there was an art students league, and I would go there and do some sculpture, and we had live models. And we have all of these, so we made all these pieces and everything, and I always liked the human body and the faces and things, so I have that, and so that's what's left over from my years as a single person. And I don't pursue it now, but I loved it at that time, and now I'm on to volunteering over at Stanford at the hospital. Right now they have too many, but I'm going to try to do something with the patients themselves, perhaps those who are dying or very ill. I'd like the one-to-one with them. So that's going to be my next thing to do. And before that, though, the reason I held off with that is because I went to Eastern Europe. I decided to go and take a little trip. And I went to Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic. It was a phenomenal trip. I went on my own, but I went with a tour group and had some tremendous experiences there. So I guess that, travel will be a part of my life eventually. I'm not the world traveler. My sister loves to travel, but I'll do that occasionally just to get out of the comfort zone. But I've really been blessed. It's been a wonderful, wonderful life, and continues to be.
Can I ask you a question? Your sister talks about you as being the true artist behind with the voice. So the question that I have to ask you is, can you tell me, do you have any singers who were your influences? And growing up Orthodox, were there any cantors or any other Jewish singers that you also found their way into your voice even when you were singing secular music?
Well, when we were in the business and we were doing Yiddish, there wasn't anybody that was sort of my idol or somebody I wanted to mimic. I just didn't have that. However, in the English music, well, I listened to everybody. We were people like Ella Fitzgerald, all these wonderful singers. I love them. But there's nobody I fashioned myself after. I just did my thing. I just sang the way I sang. And oh yes, when my husband encouraged me to take lessons with a friend of ours in San Francisco who was all part of the classical world, and she was a pianist and a coach. And he thought that I should go ahead with singing. So she taught me art songs. And I learned all the languages, Russian, 5 languages there, phonetically, but understood, of course, what I was doing. And so I said to her one day, I said, Isabel, being in show business, you just never rehearse forever. You put on a show. Can I do a home show? And she said, sure you can. So we had a little concert at our house, and that was lovely. And my husband was very encouraging that way, even with my French. It was just wonderful. And so I'm a very happy lady, a very lucky lady.
I have 2 questions. Hi.
Hi.
I was sitting next to you, and you were sort of nodding your head a little bit when your sister was talking about your name change and a little bit about possible anti-Semitism or being Jewish in America at that time, and you might have had a different perspective about that. Is that true, maybe? If you want to talk about that, I just remember you having a different perspective.
Now, I listened to my sister being interviewed, and well, the one thing was that I had a different memory of when we had all these name changes. It was quite true. We started as Rose and Evelyn Goldman. We went into being Carol and Lynn Gordon, and then we became the Burton Sisters. But the transition, getting to the Burton Sisters, my sister said there was a liquor bottle or something, and I remember it as a match cover, and it said Gallagher and Burton, and we became the Burton Sisters. And that was the only, sort of the thing that I saw differently than my sister.
I just have one other question too. You're very adaptable. Like, you adapt to every different environment. You've been thrust into singing sisters, then you had to go out on your own, and then you got married quickly. So I'm just noticing that you take on different identities really beautifully. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what you've learned about yourself. How do you have that strength to do that? In a similar way that your sister, is the chutzpah. I see you as like very highly adaptable and just sort of very open to change.
I guess I am a very adaptable person too. Like my sister, we're quite different, but I am adaptable. It's almost like there's another role around the corner. If you play this role, then I became a mother. It doesn't matter. I just love life, and I just want to have a great time, which I am having, and I always have had. And it doesn't matter the circumstance at all. I'll just adapt to it. And even though my sister keeps saying that I'm the creative one, and yes, I am creative, that's quite true. But I have a confidence like my sister, I guess. I really have a confidence in myself as a human being. I love people. I have great friendships. So it's easy to adapt to all these wonderful things in life.
So I don't mean to go back to the Borscht Belt and the Catskills and things like this, but I'm so I'm a music fan. I'm completely fascinated by this whole idea that this Jewish, we have the Chitlin circuit these days, which has been around for years and years, which is the Afro-American kind of equivalent to the Borscht Belt in a lot of ways. So what was your take on this whole thing about all these Jewish musicians and artists together? I mean, did you have any idea? Did you ever have a thought about, well, there's the Jewish world and then there's the non-Jewish world? I'm a member of this one record label where I'm a Yiddish singer, I'm a member of this other record label where I'm singing in English. Did any of this stuff ever come into it, or for you, was this just the American way of doing things?
Excuse me, before you answer, you need directional.
Yeah, I guess if you could face David a little bit more.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah, it's better.
Thank you.
okay. There were never any different feelings about being, you know, in the Jewish stage or the American stage or whatever. I just went with the flow. I would always just accept it all. There was no problem. I didn't have much conflict in myself. I really know who I am. I knew who I was then. My sister keeps thinking I'm this wonderful, creative person, and she's always being so, you know, toting, you know, my horn. But yes, I am creative. But whatever, I just know who I am as a human being, which is the most important thing, and that's why I'm able to adapt so much. It's just life, and I love life.
Do you attribute that to your parents? Your adaptability?
Adaptability. I attribute the adaptability to show business, because we were always on the go, meeting different circumstances all the time, doing different things. So, you know, I just got used to this, and it became a way of life. So I think that's what made me so adaptable to everything. And I'm very easygoing too, so whatever.
That's all the questions I have. Is there anything else that you wanted to say? You told the story so well, to be honest with you. I think
Really?
you listened to your sister and you got it in your head and you told it very, very well.
Did I really?
She really,
No, there's nothing more, David, really. That's the sum total of my life. And I just love it like my sister loves life. We both love life, and we're very positive. We've always been that way.
Did you guys ever release any records on the Yiddish label?
Let me see, Banner Records. Oh, it's a good question.
there was,
I mean, why were you? I have a question actually for both of you, but I guess why don't you answer it? You're on Banner Records. What was Banner Records if it wasn't putting out records? Because I know that you were on Banner Records, but I'm not really quite sure what Banner Records did for you.
That's a good question. Yeah.
You're on Banner Records. What is that? What was your career on Banner Records like? What would happen? You signed that. We know that.
yes, we really, well, in those days, very few people put out their own record, because what Banner Record did, the talent of Banner, the C. Merrill site, he was the producer, that he took different acts and he did a record with maybe 4 or 5 different acts together. We did something for Pesach, we did Dayenu, and then Purim, we did the Purim show. These are the things, but we never got copies. They never gave us copies of this. It's really amazing. We never got paid. But the beautiful thing, of course we never got paid. And so we didn't have any royalties, which is a strange thing. The biggest thing with Banner Records is that they really, Seymour Railside, which was the businessman, he's the one that opened up the Yiddish world for us. And he's the one that got us to sing in Yiddish in Canada and so forth. And he got us our radio show. So it was hard, like in Chinese we say man man lai. It's like one step at a time that got us up to, we were like all the other acts, but I don't remember anyone, in case you do.
No, I don't. And I think you're absolutely right about the Banner Records. But the thing, too, I didn't mention was that we did a thing called Monticello, Here I Come. Mm-hmm. And that was a little movie that is out because my husband and I saw it in San Francisco. It was hysterical. And so that's floating around somewhere, but I have no copies of that at all.
Yes, and then we saw it in Cleveland.
You did see it in
yes,
Cleveland?
the Jewish Community Center. Where is this?
What is the movie? What is it about? What is the movie?
It is the Catskills. Simple as that. They took all the acts that they felt that could work together, and they did a movie. And they shot it in Monticello. They shot us in the Catskills.
And it was just one act after the other.
Yeah.
There was no continuity. There was nothing at all. And they shot it, and that was it. So
yeah.
And I was shocked when I saw it. The Jewish community said it shocked me when I saw it. I never expected it.
It's hilarious.
But so there is a copy out there, but it's called Monticello, Here I Come, and it was a variety act. It was like the Ed Sullivan show, like the Ed Sullivan, where you had a different potpourri of acts, and that was, and they had someone introducing the different acts, and then it was so raw. I mean, it's something. It's right now it'd be outrageous, but it was very entertaining. And they had some of the comics like Michael Rosenberg, and then they had Aaron Levidoff, who did Romania, and that was that Seymour Realty turned it into a real business. And these were people from the Jewish Actors Union. In fact, his brother ran the Yiddish actor. That's when we met them. When I saw the ad in the Variety about Banner Records, so I went to the Yiddish the union, and that's when his brother was in charge of that. And then after Seymour took over.
Yeah.
What other acts were on Banner Records? Do you even remember?
Oh, Molly Pecan, Paisel Bornstein, Lillian Lux, Moshe Osher, which was he had the most incredible opera sing. In fact, what I gave you, the potpourri of 21 songs, he's on Alavai, and that's when he came onto our radio show. No one really had a direction. It wasn't like RCA or they just played, but this was the newest thing. This was the beginning of really putting anything, I'm not talking your big Yiddish stars. But Smalik Pecan went into the movies and so forth, but the others didn't. It was credibility, and it was just out there, and they didn't conduct it as a business.
Where were they located?
New York, right in where was it? The last time it was right. What was that park it's in New York City? I'm trying to remember where it is. We went there once. That's when we saw. That's the first time we went there. I found it in Variety, and that's when I met Seymour.
Yeah.
And he was there, and they had a very tight union. And nobody worked for sale. We were paid for scale. What was that? Everyone was so happy to sing or to perform, and that was the beginning of anything that they did. But there are a few artists that, I think one or two, like Jan Pierce. Okay, in fact, I'll give you a CD that RCA did with Jan Pierce, and he did all the Yiddish songs. So and Paul Muni was the first actor. You talk about many of our famous movie stars they were in Yiddish theater, for goodness sake, and they were in Yiddish. And the biggest thing, they traveled the world. At that time, of course, Europe was a wonderful place for them to go. In later years, they went to Israel, and they did Yiddish show. It was Yiddish theater. And that's the reason that it's coming back again in Israel. The young kids are learning Yiddish. Yiddish is all over because there's so much of our vocabulary. The words are all Yiddish, and that's just it. So that was the exciting thing. But to give you exactly, what they did, but there are very few, what was it? Paisel
Bornstein.
Yeah, his son, the big star, and he did something on Broadway. It's just, we started at the very beginning, and we're talking in the 40s. All these Yiddish performers, all of them came from Poland. They came from most of them were Polish. That's where there's a big Yiddish theater in Poland in 1932. This was before the Holocaust. This was before when Yiddish was a very, very important way of life, because it's a kind of a language that it's from the heart, and people identify with it. I don't know if I'm answering your questions in this, but it's really interesting. In fact, one thing I feel sad about is that when Seymour Realty, who I said was the Frank Sinatra of the Yiddish theater, I don't know whether I told you, I mentioned it yesterday to you, is that in the early years, like in the 30s, when the Jewish ghetto was, whether it was in Brooklyn or the Bronx or whatever, but no air conditioning, and when you walk down any of the streets or the avenues, all the windows were open, and they're all playing Seymour Realty's. But I have something that I think would be fascinating. Seymour's wife, Marion Crescent, she was a professor at Hunter College, and that's something you should really look up about. And then when I spoke to Seymour, this was before he passed away. I said, Seymour, I said, I keep playing your records and all the music, and you have no idea how you influenced my sister and I. And he said, Carol, I wish you come. I want to talk. I want to have a long conversation, but I'm going to Hunter College. They're interviewing, and they're doing a big testimonial for Miriam. And then he said, why don't you come to New York? He says, I want you to, and that's one regret I had in my life. He said, come in. He says, I have all of my records, and I want to give you some. And unfortunately, I couldn't go. And the following year, he passed away. And oh yes, when I was talking to him, he said, oh, Mandy Potemkin, I'm tutoring him, because Mandy Potemkin, you think of these stars, they all got it from the rabbis, the rabbinical. That's where the music really came from. When you see the Jolson story, the story of Al Jolson, and this was very much like we're in those days. It was a different time. It's hard for me to recall it because we actually lived it. We lived the life, and even to relate what happened, it's just something that just became a part of us, and that's the reason to this day. Even though Lynn didn't go to Israel when we did, and so forth, and she lived her life and I lived my life, but when Lynn, it was always there, and the love that she has. And she sings, she has this Yiddish feeling when she sings. That's the reason. This is the most talented person that I know, and you know that.
Lynn, your sister was talking about having a regret. She had a regret that she didn't go to New York the one time. If you could look back upon your life, is there a regret that you have, or are you completely happy with the course that it took?
Well, I'm sure there are regrets in my life, but offhand, I can't even think of it. We all have regrets. That's for sure. But there's nothing so monumental that it's something that gets to me that says, oh, I wish I could have done that. No, there's not. I just go along with life and accept that none of us are perfect, so I'm not perfect either, and that's just how it goes.
Another question, and this is for each one of you to answer individually. Do you have a favorite concert moment, a favorite live moment of when you were the Burton Sisters on stage, that when you think about it, you were like, that was it, that was amazing?
Our first job in the business, the Highway Casino. At that time, the way you had your hair, long hair and so forth, and you had these artificial flowers, in your hair, And when we were singing, we were so close to each other, you notice, because it was like one person singing when we were singing together. And I'll never ever forget that in the middle of one number, our heads were too close and had the flowers. When you think of a horrible thing that could happen, that we couldn't get undetached. But can you imagine, picture this too, but to our first gig in show business. And my sister, the manager, she was our manager, and she says, you never leave a stage with your back facing the audience. Can you imagine on this tremendous, it's hysterical, this tremendous stage, and both of us are leaving the stage, backing backwards. We were so naive. We had no idea. We never had a singing lesson. We never had anything. But to me, the marvel of our life is that, okay, but you know something? I think what really carried us through the years is that we were two good kids, and we were cute, and we went for everything, and it was always, and people liked us, and we had this, and it's amazing what a personality does. It got us. I'll never forget when we were working the this is an incident too. We were working the Catskills, and it was Monty Prosa was there. Monty Prosa had the La Vie en Rose. That was that famous club, which was a very exclusive from the East Side, and he was with Eddie Fisher, and on this little porch, and someone said, "There's Monty Prosa." So I said, "Evie, let's go." So we went there, and I introduced us, and for some reason, whatever spiel I gave him, and I don't even remember, and he said, you know, kids, if you're as good on stage as you are in person, you got the job. Then 1 week later, he called at Mary Kaufman, and we were working La Vie en Rose in New York. It was a matter, you know, we walked where angels fear to tread. I mean, that was it. We didn't know any better.
And you know something, though, on that thing on La Vie en Rose, it was embarrassing because, I mean, we did all right, I assume, but we had all the stars out front. So all of these very famous people, here were these young kids. When you speak of a moment like that, it was a moment, but I'm trying to think of the very positive, exhilarating moments that we had, because these were all kind of...
These were funny moments, but this made us, we were fearless. And then also, we ended up being in the...
Steve Martin, it's the Steve
no,
Allen
with
show.
The Steve Allen show.
Allen show, yeah.
Oh yes, and we did the French can on the Steve Allen show. It was, you know, one thing led to another, and that's what Mary Kaufman got for us. You know, so they did. We got the La Vie en Rose ourselves, but Mary got us the Allen show, and we hung out at the Bureau building for years, and. Edie Gourmet was there, and they said, you know, why don't you have a trio? They were looking for us to form a trio, because trios were the big things in those days. So it was just a matter of, it's so hard for me to remember moments. We laugh today about the funny things that happened and say, well, how did we ever do this?
But there wasn't a moment you were on stage that you were just like, this was just so mind-blowing, or this was us at the peak.
Well, we had moments, I don't know about being at the peak, but we had exhilarating moments for sure, because we get the response from the audience, and in the Yiddish especially, I think it was the Catskills where we got this tremendous response wherever we go. It was always a standing ovation, so we felt pretty good about that. So I think the mountains were really where we really felt wonderful about ourselves.
Well, I think the radio show was a highlight, only because we brought my mother and father there, and to see the look on their faces, we made it, you know, and to see but to have any sort of a moment of saying that we never thought that we made it, but we knew what we were, we knew how far we got, and it was a challenge. If we knew then what we knew now, we never would have done. She never would have. What I did to this poor thing, I don't know. But even what Jim said, how's it? What, you're going to be singing again after all those years? I said, how do you feel? I said, great, it's fun. I said, but Evie, how Aunt Evie doing? I hope she survives it. What can I tell you? But
She was great the other night.
well, she's wonderful. That was it. So Evie, the difference between the both of us, if we're to be on camera, is that she knows what she can do, and she does it. And you're born with a certain amount of talent, and that's what I saw in her. If we couldn't produce, I certainly couldn't do the things that I did and be successful. But she always made it happen.
Well, it was the two of us, because if you didn't promote us, then, you know, we would have been nowhere too. So it was a two-way street. We both.
But the funny thing is with Dad, all the time, we were living, and my father had a perfect pitch, gorgeous voice, and he'd be sitting in the living room, and we're upstairs in front of the mirror. We had no choreographer to do it, so everything Lynn created, and then he says, Evie, you're flat. And he would give her the note, but he had a perfect ear, or saying you did good, and he really prompted us as far as voice is concerned.
Yeah,
it was a family effort, the whole thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if this sounds like anything that you... It's just a matter of you just go on, and one success or one failure leads to another success, and say, okay, one door is closed, there's the door open, go jump through the door.
So, can we get you guys to sing for us while we have you on here?
How about do you have a first memory of a first song singing together? Maybe something from your childhood, or some Yiddish, something that really takes you back to that moment?
We have to practice.
We have not practiced for, you know how many
50
years
odd
that we
years.
have.
Oh my God.
We have a different range than we had before.
I would
But,
appreciate it. Yeah, we'll sing at Yoshi's, but I think that's difficult because we have to do some practice.
Know what I'd rather you do? Know what I'd rather you do? I gave you 21 songs. Take one of the songs, whatever, the Isle of Capri, anything, or Horace Staccato, which I love to do it, take it off the record. But come on, give us a break. We haven't even sang together. I wouldn't even do it on the phone. And she says, do you remember the words? Oh, the funniest thing I will tell you, Moshe Usher. That is hysterical. This Moshe Usher was the star. He had, like Jan Pierce, gorgeous, gorgeous voice. And he was our guest at one of the shows with Alavai. And we have the mic here. He's standing over there, and he's watching my sister. She was so nervous to say that I would forget the words. You always were afraid that I was going to forget the words, and I know that. So all of a sudden, she's looking at me in a strange way. Oh, this is hysterical. So, and he saw the acting. Oh my God.
He lost his place, but that's
He
okay.
says, the first time in my career that I ever forgot, he forgot his words. Looking at my sister, scared to death of what I was going to do to her. That is a funny moment.
I hope this is off the record.
Of course it is, but this is for you. This is why we have this relationship. She forgave me for everything, and half the time, she's such a perfectionist, as you know. To me, show business. But so what's our next job? What are we going to be doing? What challenge is there? And with Lynn, she's you hear that she sings. She has the voice. I don't have the voice now. And she really is, she's not nervous with what she will do, but she's nervous of what I'm going to do. I'm talking off stage and on stage. And I think that does it very well.
We'll do fine. We'll do fine.
Oh, what?
We'll
You're
both
not going to
do
worry?
fine. No,
Okay.
I'm not going to worry.
No, you're going to fire us. That's it. Fire us. Don't bring us back again, and that's okay. Does this sound crazy? Did you ever have a sister team like that? This is it. This is the relationship that we have. And it's so funny, when we were together, we went to my little granddaughter's bat mitzvah in New Jersey. And we haven't been together for quite a long time. And my mechatina, which is my son's mother, said, and she was with her sister. It's a big farbrengen for the whole family. And Harriet said to her, what do they have to talk about? I mean, we were constantly alone together. Don't they ever stop talking? But I think what it is really, it's really the first time that we really think about it is when we're together and we go over the 11 years really that we're together. And that's a heck of a thing to live, breathe, and work with a sister, for goodness sake. That's the reason that we never had this. That's why we had the relationship today, because it's just a matter of it was. And I think you had fun, believe it or not. Even though you're a little nervous, but you had fun in life.
Of course I have.
I know.
Of course I did.
Yeah, I know.
Wait, I need to ask one question. Lynn, did you not enjoy the public performance showbiz life?
Oh no, when I was on stage, that was it. I loved every moment of it. There was no such thing as I enjoyed myself tremendously. I was concerned because she never liked to practice.
See, that
was the thing.
See, that was the thing.
And so it was always preparation. But once I was on stage, we were on our own. That was it.
Well, it wasn't that. I was so busy getting the jobs. I was so busy with the agents that I didn't have time to really sit and practice, and that was it. She's a natural talent, and it's when you take a creator, she created the Burton Sisters. She created everything we did, and to me, and I trusted that she'd do it. I had to go out and make a living. I had to get the jobs. So therefore, who had the time? I was so busy looking at Variety and looking at Billboard and finding who are we going to attack next? What agent are we going to see? So that was the thing. And who had time to practice?
That was our livelihood. You had to practice.
Well, but I always pull through.
Yes,
Yeah,
you did.
that's it. That's just it.
Yes, you did.
You practicing for the 30th?
What?
You
Yeah.
practicing
Oh
for
my
the 30th?
God. Oh, for sure. Oh
So
my
yeah,
God.
yeah, okay.
We'll practice
Now
here.
you're both going to be nervous. I
Well-
can see it.
We'll practice here, and we'll also practice when she comes in, and it's only on the phone. We're going to practice on the phone for sure. Oh, absolutely.
You won't be
I'm so
embarrassed.
impressed.
I'm
You guys,
I'm
It's-
certain.
you
Thank
guys
you
are
so
pros.
much. This was
This is
wonderful.
incredible.
Have you really enjoyed it?
This was. Are you kidding me? Wonderful.
So inspiring.
God.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Here's